This
Let's go.
conference will now be recorded.
Scott, I've got 12:30 if you want to get started.
That's fine with me. Yep.
All righty, so we are now starting the second presentation for public, both information and input regarding the council's consideration of the potential sale of the sewer authority. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Shearer and the team to begin the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Crandall. Appreciate being here. Ben, are you able to pull up the presentation?
Crandall, I don't seem to have share screen ability right now. Is there someone that can give me that?
Yes. Let me get that taken care of right now. Hold on just a second.
While Crandall and Ben are working on that, just to kind of open up a little bit. So this will be sort of a joint presentation with Ben and myself and John Fry from PFM, handling some of the slides. Crandall will also be handling a few of the slides as well from Norristown. And then we have a couple folks from Aqua. We have Mark Luca, Tom Rafferty, and I believe Bill Packer will be joining as well, if he's not already on, to handle some of these slides as well. And we're all available for the Q&A as well at the end of the presentation. So, again, it's going to be kind of a group effort for the presentation.
No, Tom. Be done.
Right click.
Make banana.
Yeah.
Then you should have the ability now.
Very good. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
There you go.
Yep, we can see it. All right. Ben, if you could go to the first page, please. All right. So just to kind of go through a couple agenda items. So again, this afternoon will be a presentation on the potential sale for the municipality sewer system. There will be a Q&A session after we're done with the presentation. So again, we encourage folks to ask their questions. And if you do have questions sort of outside of the public meeting, feel free to send an email to the email address that you see here on page 2. The question and answers will be posted on the municipality's website. And I believe, Crandall, correct me if I'm wrong, but there were some questions that were submitted to this website following our last meeting, which was just kind of for a presentation only. And I believe the answers to those questions have been posted on the website.
Yes, I gave the direction to post them yesterday.
Great. All right. Thank you. All right. So that's, again, just kind of some logistical issues for for this afternoon. And again, we do ask that you maybe hold your questions until we're done with the presentation, and then we can turn back to some of the various slides that you may have questions with. Ben, next slide, please. So at a high level, I'll just sort of start out on page 3, and then I will turn it over to Mark Luca from Aqua to handle a few of the slides following that. But just to kind of set the stage as a brief introduction of the sewer sale exploration. So Norristown has been going through this process and doing a lot of due diligence since about mid-2017. Kind of a lot of different steps in this process, kind of taking our time and really vetting things closely before we were able to get to this point. Finally, on an early part of January of this year, the municipality had issued a request for bids, or an RFP, to the 2 pre-qualified firms that were interested in purchasing the system. On February 10th of this year, bids were received, and Aqua had submitted the highest bid of $82 million. So again, the highest bid proposal on the table for consideration is $82 million. So we're going to get a lot more into this throughout the presentation, but I think it'd be worthwhile to spend a few slides and a few moments kind of learning a little bit more about Aqua. And with that, I will turn it over to Mark Luca.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you for having us here again today. My name is Mark Luca. I am the president of Aqua Pennsylvania. And with me today is Tom Rafferty. You'll be hearing from Tom in a few minutes. And we also have Bill Packer, who's with us as well, who will be able to speak with you should you have any questions about rates or the regulatory process we will follow as this deal and transaction continues to proceed, assuming we get council approval, of course. You know, COVID-19 has exposed us to some of the truest unsung heroes in our communities. I'm sure you all know families and friends, neighbors that are heroes in the truest sense. And I want to take my hat off and thank you all for the work that you do and the work that they do. We know that our workers and the work that we do is truly essential. You know, essential work and the word essential really has become part of our daily vernacular recently. And we find that whether it's delivering drinking water or collecting and treating and disposing of wastewater, that these services are truly life essential. Now, we at Aqua are also the true stewards of the environment. We know that if we fail to deliver or protect our environment, that these businesses and services that we provide simply cannot continue. Our mission speaks to these points. It is protecting and providing Earth's most essential resource, period. And our vision is to take responsibility and to protect and provide this essential service in a transparent way. We remain committed to our customers and to the environment. And our core values are the ways in which we conduct and complete this business every day. And that's through integrity, respect, and I will always say the pursuit of excellence, because I believe that that is something we continue to strive to achieve every day. Tom, I think I pass it over to you at this point. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Mark. As Mark said, these for the slides that I'll be talking about, they're meant to provide a general overview of Aqua Pennsylvania and highlight specific areas that we think would be of interest to Norristown and its residents, such as customer service, rates, employees. And as we go through these slides, we'll touch on those subjects. So Aqua Pennsylvania at a glance, this slide is a kind of a snapshot, not only of our size, but of our structure and our capabilities. Just to back up a little bit, Aqua Pennsylvania is a Pennsylvania-based company with over 130 years of experience, and we're headquartered in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. Now, there are a lot of symbols and numbers on this slide, but one of the key takeaways is actually the customer connections, with almost 450,000 water connections and almost 40,000 wastewater connections. It's very important for the Norristown residents and the council to understand that being part of a larger pool of customers, such as the numbers are shown here, is a benefit to the customers of Norristown in the end. And that's simply for the reasons of, when you look at expenses and capital improvements, when they have to be made now, or in the past, they always fell on the shoulders of the Norristown ratepayers. In the future, with the successful closing of this acquisition, you'll be part of a much larger pool, and obviously there'd be cost sharing. So a lot less pain for the residents of Norristown with future capital improvements. Some other highlights on the slide as well. We have 576 employees on both the water and wastewater side. There are about 50 who are dedicated solely to wastewater, with another 100 who do both water and wastewater. There's a lot of opportunities for new employees to grow within the company, and that becomes pretty obvious once acquisitions are closed and Aqua takes over operations and begins to operate and make improvements to the system. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the J.D. Power 2019 Water Utility Residential Survey. This is the same J.D. Power and Associates that does reviews of cars and hands out awards for the best cars and best customer service. Well, it publishes a survey every 3 months, and it's done so for the last 4 years for the water and the wastewater industry. And what they've done, they looked at 88 water and wastewater utilities, and they surveyed the actual customers of each. And they've surveyed approximately 33,000 plus residents. And they take into account things such as delivery and billing and payment, conservation, price, communications, and customer service. And according to the latest survey, the results we have, by customer satisfaction, which is our #1 priority, according to the J.D. Powers survey, Aqua is the top rated private utility in the Northeast region. And you'll see on the right-hand side, a lot of other companies and utilities and authorities that are listed, but amongst the private utilities, Aqua is the top rated one. And there's some others on that list that you may be familiar with. We don't have to go through them all, but obviously there's a little bit of room for improvement here. We're about 3 points out of being first place overall. So that's certainly some motivation and drive for us to continue to succeed and try to reach that top spot. Next slide, please. Bill, I'd like to hand this over to you if you can hear us.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of council and members. It's a pleasure to be here. Regarding rates, Aqua is a regulated utility in Pennsylvania and reports to the Public Utilities Commission. And upon closing of a transaction, should this ultimately go through, the company adopts the current rates in existence at the time of closing, and that takes the form of a tariff. The company's tariff can only be changed when we file what's called a base rate case, which is done typically every 2 to 3 years. Our last rate case was filed in 2018, and rates effective last May, and thereafter we're probably looking at like rate cases every 3 years. Again, the Public Utility Commission are the ones who have to approve the company's requests for rates. We cannot arbitrarily between rate cases increase rates, but for any approved surcharge mechanisms, folks might be familiar with a DSIC or distribution system improvement charge. And the rate case process includes public hearings. There's interveners, the Office of Consumer Advocate, whose sole job is to represent customer interests, and other advocates who look at all the documentation of the company to substantiate the rates that are necessary to recover a reasonable return on an investment and our operating costs. It's no different than really the rates that are set that you have today in a municipal sector. They're designed to recover the cost of financing, the value on your books, and the value of the people that you pay to run the utility. In our case, we will be seeking rates for those costs. And all of our expenditures are reviewed for prudency. That's our obligation as a regulated utility. What's called the regulatory compact is our obligation is to provide affordable, reasonable service, reliable service to customers. And the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission oversees the costs and how those rates are ultimately charged to customers. Next slide. Okay.
Yeah, back up one.
Yep. Did we skip one?
Yeah. I believe there's the rate scenario slide, Ben.
I think that's after our customer service. I'll talk
I think
about
that's towards the back.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll go
my
through
bad.
the customer service, and then depending on the next slide, I'll turn it back over to Mark. But customer service, as customers of Aqua, we have 24/7, 365 days a year customer service centers to take folks' calls for both non-emergency and emergency calls. We do allow for paying on electronic methods, website. And we also have our Helping Hand program, which is designed to help those customers who might need financial assistance at various times for their bills. Go to the next slide. Okay, I'll turn it over to Mark or Tom.
Yeah, I'll speak about this one, Bill. Thank you. So this slide is a testimonial slide from our various employees that we've hired through some past acquisitions. And 3 of these examples of some of these employees are from actual authorities. Greg came over from Westchester Authorities for 21 years. He's been with Aqua. Tony has been with Aqua for 23 years. And Dave Morosi from Bristol Authority has been with Aqua for 19 years. And we take pride in welcoming new staff into the Aqua family, and we hope to do the same here. As in all of our past acquisitions, we have hired the employees who operate and manage the system. And in this case, we intend to do the same by making offers of employment to all the plant and system employees. We know they're the most valuable asset of the Norristown system, and we share that sentiment equally. And we know without their institutional knowledge of the system, we would not be able to be successful and hit the ground running on day one. You know, recently we've gone through a couple of acquisitions in the Montgomery County and just Southeast PA area. And with the acquisition of Cheltenham, for example, we hired 6 employees. With the acquisition of East Norton, we'll be hiring 2 existing employees and possibly 2 more. And then in Limerick, which was about 2 years ago, we hired 6 existing employees there. One thing I failed to mention earlier when talking about Aqua Pennsylvania at a glance, hopefully by the end of this year, through the successful acquisition of Delcor, which is a large wastewater or the largest wastewater authority in the state, we'll be adding an additional 197,000 equivalent customers along with all of our employees. And Mark, jump in if you'd like to speak further about that, but I think it's important to mention when, especially according to this slide, when we're talking about employees and the number of employees we bring over with each deal. Okay, next slide. Community engagements. Aqua Pennsylvania is deeply entrenched in the local communities where we operate. A lot of our employees not only work in local communities, but also live there. And many of our employees live in the Norristown area. And Norristown, through the acquisition, would see an immediate impact from having Aqua as your wastewater provider, not only from an operational and infrastructure improvement perspective, but also from our involvement in your community. And Aqua looks forward to partnering with Norristown in mutual areas of need. Next slide.
All right, Tom, I'll take it from here for a slide or 2. So thanks, guys, for that background on Aqua. Appreciate it. So just a little more background on how we got here. So again, as I mentioned earlier on, this process started back in the middle part of 2017 when Norristown began the exploration of the potential sale of the sewer system. Then it was early 2018 where we had presented kind of our initial high-level limited scope valuation and overall analysis of the system. A few months later, back kind of in the summer of 2018, the municipality then sent out a request for qualification or an RFQ to determine the overall market interest in the system. In October of 2018, two teams had been determined to be pre-qualified based on their responses of the RFQ to continue through the process. So then basically from, say, fall of 2018 all the way through 2019 and into early 2020, a lot of extensive due diligence occurred, a lot of negotiation of transaction documents that Tom Wyatt, who is also on the call today, did a great job shepherding that stuff through. We had various bidder meetings, an asset tour, various review of all the different agreements related to this. So overall, that period, well over a year, was due diligence that both Norristown was conducting, the bidders were conducting, the rest of the team was conducting to make sure everything was vetted pretty thoroughly. And then, as I mentioned earlier on, in early January, then the RFB, or the request for bid, was sent out to the two pre-qualified firms. February 10th, the two bids were received, and then we kind of, after the bids were received in April, then we started to have our discussions with the board. April 7th was the initial one, and then April 21st, May 12th, and here we are now for the next public meeting on May 28th. So again, that just gives a little bit of background of the process that had occurred to this point so far. So from a high level perspective, the top reasons, if you will, for exploring the sale, and then Crandall will get into in the next couple slides sort of more of the use of proceeds and diving into it a little bit more detail. But again, at a high level, going from left to right here, some of the reasons. First one, to continue to provide the residents of Norristown with quality sewer service with an experienced operator, while also eliminating the long-term risk of owning a utility system. As I think the folks from Aqua can attest to, that a utility system is a very capital-intensive system. So there's a lot of long-term risk associated with it, a lot of capital investments that I think Norristown was just looking to transfer that risk on to a new party. In the middle there, point number two, ensure a bright financial future for the residents of Norristown. I think some would view this as kind of a transformational transformational engagement, or transformational outcome for Norristown if it does move forward. Some of those things that could bring that to fruition. Number one, reducing the debt of Norristown, definitely promoting economic development, improving other deteriorating infrastructure, and providing funds for sewer rate stabilization and tax rate stabilization. So definitely looking at the ways to positively impact the residents of Norristown, which again Crandall will speak more to here very shortly. And then the third main reason, to make sure that the residents of Norristown would continue to see reasonable sewer rates going forward. So again, there's obviously more that went into it, but we felt like these three were kind of the top three. Ben, next page. So as far as the dollar amount that we're estimating, at least at the moment, to then ultimately be redeployed within Norristown to kind of effectuate some of these transformational goals, we sort of start out on the left-hand side, where we're starting with $82 million there in the blue, which is the purchase price that we went over. There may be some additional cash on hand with the system at the time of closing, but for the moment, we're not factoring that in. So, maybe that 82 million goes up a little bit when we get to closing. Then under uses, if this is moved forward the day of closing, there need to be a payoff of the sewer related debt that is currently outstanding, or will be outstanding by the time the transaction closes. And we're just making an assumption for the moment. Since there is a capital project currently underway, that number may change a little bit, but we're assuming about 21 million would be needed to pay off the sewer related debt. There would be transaction fees that would be paid at closing. There may need to be some other escrows set up that would be kind of some post-closing events, maybe related to easements or real estate. And so we're projecting at the moment a little over 23 million of various uses that would need to be kind of redeployed on the day of settlement, which would then leave us a balance down at the bottom of about $58 million and change for available proceeds for use after closing. That, again, Crandall will speak to some of the high level ideas that are currently being discussed. Now, I do think it's very important that the point there, sort of to the right of the $58 million, that if the transaction is approved, there will be a lot of time between the approval time and closing, maybe even up to a year, where these plans will be vetted in much more detail throughout the normal course of the public venues to have these discussions and, again, get public input on those. So, the main point of this afternoon is not to necessarily agree on the various use of proceeds, but it's more to talk high level of what's being currently discussed. But again, there will be a lot of time to continue those discussions and ask for public input. So with that, Crandall, do you mind taking the next couple of slides to get a little bit more into detail on the potential uses that may benefit the residents?
Thank you, Scott. I'll be happy to. Good afternoon, everybody. Going back to something Scott said at the beginning of the presentation, this definitely has been a long-term deliberative process by the municipal council in considering this. They certainly haven't taken it lightly, and they've taken a good deal of time in doing their due diligence, not only in terms of talking to staff, in terms of talking to experts and third parties, including our municipal engineer, our solicitor, and others. Also having conversation with the sewer authority itself in terms of their thoughts and their concerns and their perspective about this. So it's been a long process to get to this point. And this is not something that just, as Scott alluded to, came up. I think it's important also to know that as council started debating this back in 2017, it really kind of started in a goal setting session that they had a retreat and really around the issue of what's going to be transformational for the community, what's gonna have the community really change its trajectory. What are the things that we can do? And there were a number of steps that were taken in making that kind of a consideration. And a lot of those things were involved in the discussion that we had ultimately as a result of a $250,000 grant we received from the National Resource Network, in which council, staff, business community, engaged citizens from the community, other parties in state and local government engaged in about a year-long discussion with council around what are the things that need to happen to make Norristown sustainable going forward, in particularly operating from an environment where you have some of the poorest residents in the Commonwealth here, where white flight has adversely impacted the community, and where the council really has really been reluctant and understandably so to continue to do things that tax residents and have residents bear solely the burden of much needed improvements, much needed infrastructure, much needed service delivery in the community. So part of that was, what can we do to do that? And is it aligned with specific goals that council had laid out? These were longstanding goals that, again, go back to 2017 and continue today in terms of, one, sustainability, two, how does council look at improving the quality of life of residents? Three, how do we provide for the safety of residents? How do we improve the perception and reputation of Norristown? And certainly, how do we foster economic development in the community that has kind of been looked over for generations in terms of development? And so in doing all of that due diligence and doing all of that deliberation in reviewing the recommendations of the National Resource Network report, there were things that council wanted to focus on in terms of consideration of this. Certainly considering what economic development is happening and what is projected to happen. That development, both economic and infrastructure, relates to the Lafayette Street extension, not only Lafayette Street itself, but the fully funded slip ramp, Lafayette extension slip ramp that's going to be underway within the next year, which is going to bring more commerce, more opportunity to Norristown. Certainly the development at the state hospital, which is going on now, which is going to require a significant amount of pipes in the ground as a result of the development that's going to happen there. Council has commissioned an RFP to be developed for a master developer for that site, and there's a great deal of interest for development on that site. Downtown development that's happening right now in terms of the county's $400 million county campus project, as well as some local projects that the municipality is doing. Part of their council's economic development initiative was the acquisition of the DeLucia property at the corner of DeKalb and Main, which is the prime redevelopment property downtown. Getting site control for that property has been a goal of council for a few years. And in 2019, we accomplished that in a process that actually started in 2018. Riverfront redevelopment, the council commissioned and underwent a significant riverfront redevelopment study. We have a riverfront redevelopment plan that the council has adopted. Again, there's interest in that. Again, there's going to be massive infrastructure need for that. And those were the considerations that that council took in mind as they continue to deliberate and discuss this. And finally, just infrastructure in general, and pipes under the ground, roads, streets, et cetera, in general in Norristown. One of the things that we know we have to do, and council is very focused on, is in terms of creating that livability, is having the kind of infrastructure and the kind of infrastructure management that allows for not only current maintenance and repair, but future development as well. So all of those things went into the discussion that council has been having, and continues to go into that discussion the council is having regarding consideration of this. And so as they got to this point, then certainly it became important to them to start thinking about the types of use of proceeds that would benefit the community, benefit residents. One was certainly one of the big questions has always been, what will this mean, obviously, in terms of rates, as was earlier discussed. And so one of the things that's on the table for council right now is, as a part of their consideration of this, and this was a unanimous discussion by council, is that they want to make sure that if they go through this sale, that part of the funds proceeds will be to establish a sewer rate stabilization fund, so that residents wouldn't have to feel the full impact of fees, and that would be a gradual process that was very much tenable and affordable for residents. Second, another was economic development initiatives. Like the DeLucia property, there are other strategic property acquisitions for economic development that the council is interested in town. And this gives a way to do this. It took really this council kind of stepping out to make that DeLucia acquisition something that has been a goal of this council for 20 years. The municipal council, 20 years. It finally happened this year. So they want to be able to continue that momentum by looking at possibility of other acquisitions as well. And this is, this acquisition would certainly support that goal. Property tax stabilization is very, very important. We all know, and council certainly acknowledges that nobody likes to increase taxes. This council has been adverse to doing it, but even though we have operated as an organization in a very lean manner in terms of operational costs, those costs that we have no control over, pension contributions, our obligations as far as pensions, healthcare, all of those things that we do initiate strategies to handle that, but it's still things that we need to be able to take care of and have to take care of. And one of the ways that we can, again, lessen the tax impact on residents is to use these funds to stabilize our tax rate so that we're not making major tax increases. Their quality of life improvements are very, very important. It's part of council's main goals. And so improvements in the parks, in all of the parks. One of the things as a part of that goal was a couple of years ago and the acquisition of, and then last year, the renovation of the former PAL building, which was an armory building, as the municipality's first recreation department. Well, even that site acquisition was strategic for the council because part of the long range goal that this council has for recreation is to not only use that property, but the property on either sides to further improve and provide for recreation and leisure services improvements. So the municipality currently owns almost from Markley Street all the way down to Sturgeon in terms of property for recreation and services, and they're very much interested in further developing that site to enhance recreation and leisure services for residents. We carry debt from pension, debt from former projects, and so one of the things that we want to do and council is considering doing is certainly paying down that debt, because that debt is paid by property taxes. And so one of the ways to lower the burden on residents is to use parts of the proceeds, to leverage parts of the proceeds from this potential sale to offset debt costs so that it's not passed directly on to residents. There are, as anybody who has been in this building and certainly now, council everyone knows that council has approved a project for rehabbing this building. The building is failing massively. We had to close down the finance department and further consolidate limited space. And so after an assessment of the building, we got to the point where we have to take care of it. Council's already approved and funded a project to rehab this building. Part of the proceeds of this funds could be leveraged to, again, pay off the debt associated with doing this rehab project. But like this building, all of our buildings, there had not been in prior generations a capital improvement and capital maintenance plan for any facility that municipality operates. As a result, all of the facilities are in a state of disrepair. And one of the things that the council is very much interested in doing is making sure that not only the municipal hall, but there's a suitable and adequate place for the public works operation and the equipment. There's millions of dollars of public works equipment that it is subject to the whims of the elements, which should not be the case. And so that is a part of it. Council's already embarking through their guidance. We've got a RACP authorization in the works for a consolidated fire department, since we actually lease facilities from private entities in terms of fire departments. But we can not only reduce our capital costs, but our operating costs by consolidating a facility and the cost of that RACP plus really the use of funds that we're spending now for rental to do that. And then again, rather than tax residents even continually for the use of those existing funds, leverage these funds to reduce that tax burden on residents for our fire department. Also, one of the things that's on the table is the municipality for several years, this council has been interested in supporting the school district and particularly the students of the school district by creating an endowment scholarship for Norristown resident high school students. And so they definitely have that on the table as one of the considerations to use a portion of the funds to endow that scholarship. Next slide. Okay, I think that's all of the ones that I see on the slide. So again, I'll go back to that National Resource Network process that we talked about. It was a year-long process, and one of the specific outcomes of that process that again involved council, staff, our hired professionals as well as third-party professionals, the National Resource Network group of economists and others who came up with recommendations for council. Council adopted that report and the recommendations, and one of it was to put ourselves in a process of looking at 5-year planning, which we're doing, which is a part of our budget process. But one of the things they also highlighted in that is that the council should seriously consider the sale of the authority as a way to transform the community in a way that's desirable for both council and residents in terms of quality of life issues that are here. So this is definitely in alignment with that adopted report and the 5-year financial plan that the council has, and certainly the goals and mission that council has set for multiple years. I'll turn it back over to you, Scott.
All right. Well, thank you, Crandall, for that great summary. So obviously, you've heard, about the bid, the competitive bid that was put in by Aqua of $82 million. You've heard from Crandall with a great summary of the potential use of proceeds that could really benefit the residents and ratepayers of Norristown. And one of the other things that we mentioned is making sure rates, continue to be reasonable. So I think Bill Packer, I believe he's going to take this slide again to show some hypothetical rate projections. Now, I do think, and I think Bill will say this again probably multiple times, but the rates that we're showing here on this slide are not set in stone. They are just projections. Ultimately, the PUC has the total jurisdiction over the rates, but this is meant to just kind of give us a general idea of what rates may look like in the future. So with that, Bill, do you want to kind of add a lot more to that?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Scott and Crandall. Excellent presentation again on the economic benefits, tax benefits, and of what the monetization of this would accomplish for the town. And it's a big decision for Norristown. Equally for the company, right? I mean, the company is making an $82 million investment in the system with a continued investment of capital within the first 10 years, which is an additional $10 million. And, when you think about rates, the scenario one I'll talk about a little bit, which says that it's rates quantified at the full value of an $82 million bid. And as you can see, the current rates of Norristown are around $27 a month compared to, $6 at a full pricing. And, when you think about it, the Norristown's rates today are really priced to recover the value that you guys have on your books, which currently is around $20 million. If you referred back a couple slides in Crandall's presentation, as I think Scott had that slide, and ultimately representing what's left, the 59 million of proceeds that would be available for the town to address public projects, stabilize rates, and stabilize the tax base as well. reason why we show scenario one is upon, if we were to close this deal, sign an APA, and ultimately submitting to the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, one of the filing requirements is a customer notice, not just to the Norristown residents, but also to the residents of the company, showing the impacts of what this acquisition would have on our existing customers' rates, not just the acquired customers' rates in Norristown. And one of the scenarios is in fact a scenario one that would show that if you priced out this deal, the current rates for the full valuation would need to go up to a number. So it's more of a notice and transparency to show you what a potential upside could be. The reality of Pennsylvania rate making and long-standing rate making, and certainly in my experience, 20 years in doing this, is scenarios in line with scenario two or others, which show the benefits of transacting with a company such as Aqua like this. Because we have 450,000 customers versus your 10,000 connections in Norristown. And we're able to use the power of that 450,000 customers to spread the cost of our investments over everyone. Think of it like a large insurance pool, right? I'd submit to you that if you were to get car insurance just for yourself and only yourself, that car insurance premium would be substantially higher than it otherwise would be transacting with insurance companies today. The same is true in the way we approach rates. We look at the cost of service for all of our systems and where we make investments throughout Pennsylvania. And then we're able to spread those costs in a meaningful and reasonable way. And the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission and the consumer advocates really believe and practice two principles. One they call gradualism, and I'll say avoidance of rate shock. And avoidance of rate shock stands for itself, right? Rate shock of doubling, tripling, quadrupling rates, right? The PUC, consumer advocates, are not interested in that, and they like to seek and authorize rate proposals that make sense and show a gradual rise to a cost of service, which is an example that's below in scenario two. It's not exactly what would be proposed, but shows an example of what the company has had in some of its past experience. So that's really what the company would seek to do in the future. And that benefit really continues on. I mean, if you think about it, even after what's on this slide, I mean, as long as the company is owning and operating and running Norristown, to the extent that we make $1 million investment in your town, right? Again, we get to spread that over all of our water and wastewater customers in some form or fashion, which is 450,000 compared to your 10,000. So I'd submit to you that for the same investment, if Norristown was to invest $82 million in its system, plus another $10 million and ongoing $10 million every 10 years, you guys would equally see rates that are high. So it's one of those things where it's a cost benefit, right? You guys are weighing the benefits of monetizing and your sewer investments for some of the public projects that and public considerations on your tax side that you're weighing heavily. So we think that the rate scenarios and the options that we have doing a deal with Aqua and our ability to spread those costs is advantageous for not just Norristown, but in the future for our own customers. Because again, it works the other way as well. As we make investments over in Western Pennsylvania, we're able to leverage the power of all of our customers, including Norristown, to equally spread those costs over time. So it truly is a win-win, and we look forward to it.
All right, thanks, Bill. So next slide, Ben. So just equally as important as the rates are the employees. So the agreement has in there stipulated that the employees will be protected. And so the first bullet point, the authority currently has about 17 employees dedicated to running the system. 14 of those employees are unionized with Teamsters, and then there are 3 non-union employees. Again, Norristown has mandated as part of this sale and part of the agreement that all the employees are offered employment with Aqua. these employees will be offered basically substantially comparable benefits and compensation to what they currently have. And so again, that is all built into the asset purchase agreement that would need to be honored upon signing of that. Next slide. So as far as potential next steps, if Norristown continued to move this forward, basically April through June is the board's consideration of Aqua's proposal, including these various public meetings. Later in June is when the board would consider an ordinance accepting Aqua's bid. Then throughout the summer of this year, there'd be various steps that would need to be undertaken, mandated by kind of the legislation for Act 12. We need to conduct additional evaluations and engineering studies. And then this fall through mid part of 2021 would be a lot of work with the PUC process, gathering various real estate documents, and then finalizing all the actual documents to close the transaction, which may occur sometime mid 2021. Just kind of depends on how the PUC process goes, but this gives you a general idea. And as far as that June date, kind of going back to the left-hand side of that timeline, the one on the bottom, that date right now is currently set for June 16th for that the consideration of the ordinance accepting Aqua's bid. And there is another public meeting that is scheduled for, I believe that is the evening of June 9th is when that next public meeting is going to take place. Ben, next slide, please. And then lastly, just to wrap up, again, back a few years ago, Norristown began this exploration to determine the potential benefits. If it did move forward with the sale of the sewer system with the $82 million bid that was offered by Aqua, I think we believe that the municipality can accomplish most, if not all, of the goals that it had initially set out to. Some of the key components of the sale, again, system would be sold to an experienced local operator that is heavily regulated by the PUC and other agencies. Future rates will be set by the PUC. Employees will be protected within the contract, and upfront proceeds will be used to benefit the residents of Norristown. So with that, again, I'll remind everyone here on this last page that obviously we're going to start the Q&A session now, but also if there are questions that come to mind after we conclude today's meeting, again, feel free to send questions to the address listed here on this page, and we will make sure that they are addressed and put on Norristown's website. So with that, I think we're going to open it up now for Q&A.
If anyone has some question, you certainly can unmute yourself. I'll actually unmute everyone, and unmute yourselves. And if you want to have a question, and we'll be happy to take it.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. This is Fernando Feliciano. For the sake of transparency, I'd like to say that I'm a board member of the Waste Authority. So I'd like to make a couple of statements and maybe a question here, if possible. First of all, I'd like to say that it was a very, very good presentation. We've met with some of the folks involved, and we appreciate that. But first of all, I'd like to say that, your presentation made it sound like the authority is actually run by council or by Crandall, and it is not. It is an independent entity and has been for a number of years. So I want to make that clear. Secondly, I think it was a bit disingenuous of Crandall to say that that this process and council actually interacted with the authority, with the board, because they have not. For some reason, refused our repeated requests for meetings to go over this. So this is a bit just my point that even though we did meet with some of the folks, we had a couple of very minor meetings, mostly presentations of what you were going to do, but never actually came in and talked to us face to face. So I find that rather alarming. Secondly, to continue, I heard a lot about rates being stabilized. For those that don't know, Norristown Municipal Waste Authority rates are the lowest, or one of the lowest in all of Pennsylvania. We have worked very diligently to make sure that rates do not rise in the area, considering your constituents and the already very, very large tax burden that we have. We have worked with the authority, with councils in the past as good business partners to bring in more businesses. So I find that also needs to be addressed, as it sounded that this was also not being alluded to. And lastly, the 58 million that you say is going to be left over after this bid. How is this also going to be divided up with West Norristown, who has an agreement and a contract with the authority currently to own 1/3 of the waste plant? That has to be taken into account for this 58 million fund. That sounds like you guys have a tremendous wish list. It would be fantastic to go through. Really shrinks down after that. Also I wanted to point out, historically, the privatization of waste authorities has made the rates for the constituents and the customers increase by close to 700%. Currently, it looks like for us, it's going to go up 300%, in addition to the recent increase already sent out by the American Water for our regular water. So the residents of Norristown are going to have an extreme burden put on them as a result of that, as a result of all of these other things, and a result of all these planned things that council has gone through. So I just wanted to make that clear. I wanted to voice my disapproval of this sale, thinking that making a money grab is not in the best interest of Norristown. I have been a resident for over 20 years. I have been friends with a number of people in the council, and again, I find it very, very offensive, actually, that council never ever approached the authority and came to a meeting and discussed with us in person. So there you go. I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, and that at least my voice has been heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'll let Scott and the rest of the folks respond to any technical issues, but certainly on the issue of disingenuousness and not meeting with the authority, I do want to respond this way. Certainly, it's not my intention to be that, and it's disingenuous. I think we have been very forthcoming. I certainly have had discussions with Barry Thompson. Council has actually met face to face with the authority on the 2 times that meetings were set up. But as far as any other meetings, anytime anybody on the board has requested a meeting with council that has been brought to my attention, we've facilitated. But other than those meetings that we set up, I am not aware, and I don't, unless council is, I am not aware of another meeting that the authority requested. And
we requested some other meetings as well, and they went on deaf ears. I'm letting you know what I'm seeing here, and I just want to make sure that the public knows of this as well. But if maybe there's maybe a precedent here, being the circumstances as they are, that we are all on lockdown, and having a quote unquote public meeting at 12:30 in the afternoon, when most of our constituents are hopefully, if they can get work, they're working. But I don't see why we could not move these, have for a meeting to be had, a public meeting, a true public meeting to be had at some time after this lockdown is over as well. Just overall. Just letting you know.
I appreciate it. I absolutely have, and do. And like
Thank
I
you,
said, I
Crandall.
can
I
say
appreciate
certainly on behalf of council, any meeting request that has come to us, we've honored. So I don't know of a request that we have not honored. And if there is one, and I know that we've talked among ourselves as a group, about, and I reached out to Barry Thompson again after we got to the point of public presentations to say anytime that the board wants to meet, we are available. We will make council available to meet with the board. So we have done that. I know that to be true. Scott and anybody else who wants to respond.
Yeah, thanks, Crandall. Maybe I will defer to Tom Wyatt in regards to the West Norristown agreement. And again, there's discussions going on with West Norristown regarding that agreement. So Tom, I'm not sure, how much you're able to say at the moment. Discussions are being had, but if you have any comments.
Sure. Thank you, Scott, and thank you to the gentleman for his good questions. Yes, there is an agreement with West Norristown, and we have had one sit-down discussion with the representatives from West Norristown. We understand the agreement. Aqua understands the agreement, and we're going to move forward with continued engagement with them, and hopefully reach an agreement that's beneficial to both parties, but not something that we've lost sight of. Also, not something that we can appropriately negotiate here on the line. But you've identified, sir, a very important issue that we have turned our attention to in the past, and will very much turn our attention to in the future if council decides to move forward.
Okay. Thanks, Tom.
Oh, and I do want to add that this meeting is one of a series of 3. So we wanted to make sure that we had availability for folks who were available in the daytime, and the next meeting will be an evening meeting, as was the first one.
Right, Crandall, I was just going to piggyback on that. So the meeting scheduled for, like you said, the first one that we had a week or so ago, that was an evening meeting. The next one that's scheduled is for June 9th at 6 p.m. And then that's another Q&A session. And then June 16th is an evening meeting. So again, we're trying to accommodate everyone's different schedules, some that may be tied up during the day, some that may be tied up in the evening. So we're trying to hit the different time periods so that we can accommodate all the different schedules.
Scott?
Any other questions?
I have comment. I'm a Norristown resident. My name is Rachel Fecco, and I agree with the previous caller about the meetings not being really as accessible to the public as it should be for a consideration of something this huge. To call into a phone number and not be able to see the slides that are being presented. I would think you would want to as closely reflect a real public meeting as you would have if we weren't confined to our homes. So I would like to request that for future meetings, you consider a platform that makes it more obvious to the public how they can actually see the presentations live. I kind of figured it out when I called in and it said, welcome to GoToMeeting. I figured out that I could go onto the GoToMeeting app and log in that way, but that's a lot of extra steps that I don't think a lot of people would take. Anyway, what I wanted to say was I submitted a public comment by email, but I don't know how those are being recorded, so I'll just read what I wrote. I'm addressing this to council. I hope that they are able to hear this at some point. I only see one council member on this call right now. But I wanted to thank the council for all they do for the city of Norristown. I love Norristown, and I know that council does too. I know that our city could do amazing things with the money from the sale of the sewer, but the mindset to me is no different than like the check cashing pawn shop joints on the corners. They exist for one reason, and that is to make money. They offer a deal that seems like a quick fix, but it will turn costly down the road. As a previous caller mentioned about rates increasing, and I understand you've got the funds proposed to protect consumers against that, but my point is that Aqua exists to make money. I watched a YouTube clip of the former CEO, who was the CEO for decades of Aqua, on Mad Money. If you're not familiar with Mad Money, it's a program that basically their mission is to make shareholders money. And they interviewed him. The segment was entitled Aqua America CEO, Turning Water into Money. And at the end of the interview, the CEO was congratulated for doing such a good job for shareholders, not communities, shareholders. Anyone who thinks that Aqua is here to help us is wrong. They are here to make money. I'm not accusing any one individual on this call, but as a company, their mission is to make money. It is to make a profit, and those who stand to make a profit never, ever have the best interest of the consumer at heart. They're predators. They're seeking out struggling communities to offer quick fixes that are seemingly too good to turn down. The difference in a publicly owned utility is that it's owned by Norristown. Norristown, who cares about the people of Norristown, should have the control of that utility, not a company that exists solely to make money. Norristown owning the sewer is accountable to the people, has control over it. We should not abdicate control to a for-profit company. I'm begging council not to be short-sighted about this decision, not to succumb to the predators that these large companies like Aqua are. Thanks, and thanks especially to Norristown Council for all your hard work. You are greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
There wasn't really a question in there, but I do think that it's appropriate to respond. And I do appreciate the comments as well. Certainly they were heartfelt, I can tell by the expression of the caller. I think the suggestion that we're predatory in our approach is inaccurate. We were invited to participate through a request for proposal process that was discussed here earlier. So there really was a solicitation for our participation, as well as others, any others, who were qualified and wanted to participate. I think to suggest that we are beholding simply to shareholders is also misinformed. We are regulated by many, many government agencies who control and influence in many ways how we conduct our business. And so that would be, certainly we talked a lot about the Pennsylvania Public Utilities Commission. Understand that they
Love you, babe.
are involved with management audits, business continuity planning, emergency operations inspections, how we treat our employees and customer service. There are many, many things that they alone, as one agency, are very involved with how we conduct our business, and they hold us out and measure our performance to make sure that we are exceeding in all of the services that we provide. That would apply as well to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, where we look at our percent compliance, if you will, so many days a year that are in compliance with environmental regulations as well as health regulations. We're also held by the Schuylkill River Basin Commission, the Delaware River Basin Commission, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, all of which seek to make sure that we perform at the highest level of standards. So while I appreciate the commitment and the expression of concern, I did think it was warranted, despite the fact that there wasn't really a question, that I express our viewpoints on this process and where we are and how we conduct ourselves, as I said earlier, with integrity, respect, and the pursuit of excellence is truly something that we believe in, and how we conduct ourselves daily. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Any additional questions?
Yes, hi, my name's David McMahon. I'm a resident of Norristown also. I appreciate the first other comments and remarks here. They kind of hit on things I already wanted to bring up, so this will save me a little bit of time going through this. First thing I'll say is I filed as soon as I first heard about the first presentation, I filed a right to know request, which is not going to come for like 30 days after submitting it. So that's going to come more or less after the June 16th meeting. So not terribly helpful, although it may pay off down the road. I had a couple questions. One was kind of something that was somewhat answered in the RFQ sheet that was put out, but I just want to restate it a little bit. So last August, when the RFQ was put out, is that really the same as as Norristown figuring out how to do a municipal or township partnerships and sort of go the public partnership route versus privatization? So that's one question. Another question, if we're looking over a 10-year span for rates to double or triple, right, that's kind of like it's still coming from residents, whether you want to call it a tax or not. I'm not interested in really in a tax versus a rate increase or whatever as being fundamentally different to me. But my question is, what those proposed dollar amounts of those increases, how useful would that be as funds for the for Norristown to use, say at like municipal bond rates or whatever, right? That's a question. The West Norriton, that was actually addressed. I'll skip that. Do Cheltenham, Limerick, East Norriton, and Delcora feel like they're going to be all helping us out, sharing our rates? You know, like if you make every time you buy one of these, you make the same pitch to someone that the costs are going to be spread out. That's actually kind of like a nice way of saying, well, we're on our way to becoming a monopoly, and we're going to achieve economies of scale that are going to be helpful to you. But I think that there's a dollar value that goes with using our direct control, as well as that maybe should be factored into this consideration. As to the water authority, is there any documentations or anything that was developed that showed like the scope of projected work for the sewer authority was kind of beyond their capacity? Is there any kind of document to that? Was there an engineering study done sort of surveying the totality of the projects? That's a question. I also have a question as to a lot of the various development projects that were mentioned, you know, would not be in proposing the overall cost of these developments, whether it's the Riverside or the State Hospital grounds. Why would not that extra infrastructure need be incorporated into the total dollar value of each development project, rather than sort of somehow spinning off the cost of sewer as a separate item? So that's a question also. Because it would seem to me like some of this work, capital improvements, could go out to, in what way would they go out as contracts versus selling off our public control? And I would just add that the Public Utility Commission, while, you know, yes, it's a government agency, it's still one further insulating layer between, you know, us residents and the ability that we have to influence rates, and not, you know, that we would feel not in our favor. Again, because there are shareholders who are often consideration in these rate increases, and where do residents rate next to shareholders? I think that's the last of my questions.
So I think some of those were answered. That's, you know, now posted or will be posted on the website. But just to kind of take a couple, there were a bunch in there, but from memory, regarding the RFQ itself. So when the RFQ went out, the request for qualification, that went out to, I'd say, a group of potential parties, you know, maybe over 100, 150 of some of those. And there were quite a few that were for other public agencies, other public authorities. So we did make sure that it did go to a lot of the surrounding other municipal authorities. to look at, say, a public-to-public private partner or public-to-public partnership like you had mentioned. We did not get responses from any of those. So, again, the list that the RFQ went out to was very expansive, and it was the two regulated companies, Aqua and American, that did submit to that. So again, it was a wide net that was cast to, looking, at public to private, public to public, all sorts of different alternatives. The other question, I'm not sure I totally got. I think it had to do with the use of proceeds, but then you had mentioned with bond rates. I'm just not totally sure what you meant by that. If you can explain that a little bit more, I'm happy to help answer that.
Oh, yeah, no, I just meant like, so if there's a, like we see from the charts, like over a 10-year time projected rate increases, if we did the math and multiplied by that, the number of like households or customers, within that, what's that dollar figure? What does at sort of like municipal bond rates, what does that total amount of money, what's the purchasing power of that as far as meeting the goals of Norristown?
Yeah, again, I think if I understand it, and Ben and John, feel free to chime in from PFM as well if I'm not understanding right. But yeah, I think we kind of did look at some of that from a high level, that if Norristown would just basically go out and borrow, let's just say in this hypothetical, $58 million to try to effectuate a lot of these different initiatives, kind of what that would translate to as far as debt service and ultimately, say, real estate tax impact. It was a very, very large number, kind of very, very, a lot higher than the sewer rate increase estimates that we had shown on some of those other slides on this.
Okay, just as a quick follow-up then, would any of these numbers and some of this decision-making that went on, do you think that's likely to be in, well, hopefully that we'll see what happens when I have the documents from my right to know request, but these were some of the things that I was hoping to see as documents, going forward, to sort of look into how this was all evaluated and these proposals, who was sought out. So that's, we'll see where this all goes, but I guess I won't know for another couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Hearing none. Oh, yep.
Hello?
Hello, we heard someone.
Oh, hi. Hi, this is Maccabee Hirsch. How you doing?
All right, how are you, sir?
I'm good. I have actually 3 questions here. PUC complaints, and if you're willing to discuss how many complaints have been filed against Aqua, like I would say over the last 10 years. And then Delcora, I would say that you're kind of counting the chickens before they hatch. I would like to know about the lawsuit, and I don't think that's been finalized yet. And then I would like to ask about, has there been any discussion of giving Norristown residents shareholder equity in the company with the sale of our utilities to you? And that's all.
Hello. Scott, I think those were directed to us.
Yep.
So,
if you want to go for it, Mark. Yep, please. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, the first question was about the number of complaints to the Public Utilities Commission over the last 10 years. And those are not certainly facts and figures that I would have at my fingertips. But I would answer the question slightly a little differently, and to say that the caller points out, Matt, I didn't hear your last name, I'm sorry, but if I can refer to you as Matt, pointed out that there is a process wherein a person, certainly a resident, a customer, can issue a complaint if they were not satisfied by the response that the company provided on any one of many particular issues that may come up, whether it's service, a bill, water quality, wastewater operations, whatever it may be. And many times when we have meetings like this or public meetings, people will talk about the dealing with the Public Utilities Commission and the inability of a customer or resident to be able to communicate, file a complaint, ask a question, and get an answer. I think despite the fact that I don't have the number handy, this customer has actually pointed out the exact opportunity that customers have that they're able to communicate with and get answers from the Public Utilities Commission if they do not get answers from a regulated utility, or if they get answers that they do not agree with, or frankly, they don't like. So we do pride ourselves on our customer service. You saw one of the slides earlier that we are rated third across the Northeastern regulated utilities, and we are first in the same pool group of regulated utilities. So we do pride ourselves very much on customer service. The Delcora lawsuit is not against Aqua. It is directed at Delcora itself, and it is specifically directed at the formation of the trust. So we are not a party to that. We do believe that the transaction will continue. And while we don't know what the answer will be at the end of the Public Utility Commission's review, an ultimate action, whether it is in favor of or opposed to, we are hopeful that that will occur. We do not mean to suggest that it is a done deal. Matt, I'm sorry again, Mr. Matt, if I may, referred to it as counting our chickens, and we certainly do not mean to suggest that that is a done deal. It is anything but that. And there are certainly lots of questions that will continue to arise over what will turn out to be at least a 9-month, could be as long as a 1-year public process. And so we still will track that very carefully and are very respectful of the process and look forward to that continuing. The last question was about shareholder equity, that was not discussed in the request for proposal and is not a component of our bid. So they were the 3 questions that I jotted down, and hopefully that answers Mr. Matt. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, any additional questions? All right, well, Crandall, hearing none, I will turn it back to you.
All righty, thank you so much, Scott. Thank everybody for attending. Thank you so much for the questions and comments that were provided. As Scott alluded to earlier, we will post, and we've recorded this session, so we're gonna post this session as well on our website. The presentation is actually already should be on our website for anybody who would like to access a copy of the presentation. And our next scheduled presentation is, as Scott said earlier, June 9th at 6 p.m. And information is out about that, and we will continue to push it out as well. With that, thanks everybody again for participating. Please stay safe and take good care.
Very good, thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a great day. Good day.